This show is brought to you in part by viewers like you who joined a Patreon or become YouTube members. Thank you. And if you could, hit the like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content. Hey, what's up, and welcome to QnA, the show where I take your questions and answer them here on this show. The reason QnA is coming on today and not on Friday where it usually does is, one, I'm trying something new out, right? I want to see if breaking up the Q&A and the hot take videos helps them perform better. But two, I'm going to be doing a video with Tyvis Powell, who you might have already seen on the channel this week, talking about Ohio State players that could become Cleveland Browns and just kind of having a conversation about that day specifically, that conference championship day again, and how that's going to really affect some of the Browns' evaluation. And, you know, just because it was so themed around that, I thought that video made more sense to come out Saturday morning than a Q&A video would. So if you're wondering why is this hitting your sub box, it's Friday. You're used to this being on a Saturday. This is why. If you're wondering if your question is going to be on this show, you got to ask yourself, hey, did you subscribe? Did you say notified? Did you check the community tab? Because if you do all three of those things, you get an opportunity to ask those questions. That all being said, let's jump to the first question, which comes from Trez, who says this. With Kevin being on the hot seat, what candidates could we realistically expect this offseason? Realistically, right? The difficult part about letting Kevin go is that realistically, the person you bring in is going to have much less experience than Kevin Stefanski and is not going to have some of the accomplishments that Kevin Stefanski has, right? You'll be starting over. Realistically, you're looking at a talent pool of coaching prospects that are very unproven, because I think those are the guys who you're going to be able to pick the best quality of candidate from. I don't think there's going to be much there from the former coach Spear. I don't think they're going to be able to entice a coach to leave college football to take this job. I don't think they're going to be able to entice a current NFL coach to leave their job to take the Browns job. So I think they're just kind of in this difficult place where it's going to be, you're going to have to really lean on process in order to replace Kevin. Again, I don't want to present when I say things like, hey, I think you need to look at your options as far as Kevin Stefanski goes. I don't want to present that as if it's just this easy peasy thing to do. It's not. It is a difficult thing to replace, and he is a much different coach to replace than every other coach that this team has fired since 1999. Kevin leaves behind an actual legacy. Whether people are beloved of that legacy or not is a whole different debate. But there's a lot that Kevin leaves behind here that needs to be addressed and is going to create a void of sorts. So it's a lot to consider, you know, and I think that all has to go into whether you keep him or not. So yeah, if you're expecting big names to line up for this Cleveland job, I don't think that's going to happen. I think the big names are going to want to go to the more secure opportunities, the opportunities where you don't really have to project, right? The opportunities that have quarterbacks or have clear, obvious paths to quarterbacks, you know, whether it's developing one or not. Like, you know, if there are coaches out there, like I wasn't a big fan enough of Cam Ward to take him number one overall, but there are a lot of people out there who were. And some of those people do coach football. And some of those people might say to themselves, oh, yeah, the Tennessee job, I probably would rather take that because they have a quarterback that they're committed to organizationally versus the Browns job, where it's a question of even if they're going to take quarterback because they don't really have the top pick in this year's draft. So there's a lot to consider this offseason. And I think it will behoove the Browns to really spend a lot of time from now until the last day of the regular season, you know, evaluating everything that they need to, because, you know, Kevin Kevin's going to leave a hole. It's not going to be, there's no easy slam dunk way to replace him. That's just the reality. Doesn't mean that you can't improve from Kevin. You can. Doesn't mean that that's the only reason you keep Kevin either. But it is something to consider there, and not take lightly. If you underestimate that challenge, you will find yourself looking like the Tennessee Titans. The Max Out Dojo says, I don't know why I added a D to it. It says, Q, thanks for all you do, keeping us informed, same, much appreciated. In this last game, the 49ers, I think the O-line and skill players played better than other recent games, and yet Shedeur couldn't connect with consistency. This seems rather obvious. I'm just wondering how these situations and issues are discussed in individual team meetings. Do coaches blatantly call this stuff out to work correctly, or are they careful to protect egos or feelings? So this question gets brought up, right? And I hear people who've actually coached that also do content for the Browns. They weigh on this. The reality is that there's a million different ways to do things, and people are unique beings, so you have to handle things uniquely to whoever you're speaking to make sure they hear that message. Maybe how you talk to Shedeur or how you have to work with Shedeur is much different than how you have to work with other people, right? Tom Brady was notorious for wanting his coach to be incredibly hard on him, right? So Bill got to operate a certain way with Tom, but Bill didn't operate the same way he operated with Tom with Rob Gronkowski, who he wasn't as hands-on about, right? Like, there's just different ways of handling folk in situations based on the people involved and what you think is going to be the best thing for those people. As far as like the offensive line, having a better day than the quarterback did, I think it's because the 49ers defense is really banged up on the defensive line, and they presented less problems on the line of scrimmage than they did in the back end, right? Also, that game was a lot more difficult for a passer, right? 40-mile-per-hour winds. It's going to be tough for anybody throwing the ball. Obviously, Brock Purdy played in that same win and did what he needed to do. But Brock Purdy's an experienced starting quarterback in the league who's gotten a second contract. Shedeur Sanders is a fifth round selection who is trying to make his way and stick into the league. They're two completely different points of their career. You wouldn't expect the results to be similar. So, I think I can't give a definitive answer on how they handle things internally. I think that varies based on, what's going on and what coach is there. Like, I bet Jim Schwartz has a different approach than, other coaches in the building. So it's just a way of approach and doing things that changes based on what the situation is. I don't think the problem for the Browns has been that they're not getting the right kind of motivation or competent coaching as far as like the week-to-week stuff. I know it's easy to throw a lot of the problems there. I think a lot of issues are the Browns are dealing with an extreme amount of youth and inexperience on this team. And in some cases, a lack of talent. And when that's the situation, you're just going to have things pop up like that popped up for this team this week. I think that's just the unfortunate part of having a young team. I don't really think you can coach your way out of it, right? Like, you could have the best mentors, teachers, parents in the world, but youth is going to make you do some dumb shit. Youth and inexperience is going to make you do some dumb shit because you don't know. You know what I mean? Hey Nice says this. Do you think there's any beef between Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders? This is an interesting one. Do I think that Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders are best friends? No, they're not best friends. It's pretty clear they're not best friends. Do I think that they aren't professional with each other? No. Like, I think the situation they're in, the way that they've been pitted against each other by the media, and in some ways even by the Cleveland Browns themselves, is going to create a lot of tension, a lot of professional tension, right? They're both vying for the same job. And, this isn't a situation like when these guys are vying for a job and Joe Flacco was there. Like, yeah, there's tension, but Joe Flacco so experienced that he knows how to deal with that tension. It's a little bit different. Both these guys probably don't know how to deal with that tension. Dillon Gabriel has started everywhere he's gone in his career in college. The same's true with Shedeur. So both these guys are in a situation they're unfamiliar with. Both these guys are used to being, the starting quarterback, and they find themselves battling each other for that role. There's going to be tension there. There's going to be a level of competition there. You add on top of it that these two don't seem like they would naturally be best friends. I can't speak for who Shedeur would be friends with, nor can I speak with who Dillon would be friends with. I don't know their friends, right? But I don't think they're best friends behind the scenes, but I don't think there's beef. Like, just because you're not best friends with somebody doesn't mean there's beef. There's plenty of people, if I flip this to something that I can relate to, right? There are plenty of people who do sports talk in this city that I don't have a personal relationship with, but I don't have beef with. Right? Some people might imply that I got beef going on, but I don't really got no beef with nobody for real. And there are some folks that people think I got beef with that I'm actually friends with, right? Like it's people do this thing online where they try to guess stuff, but it's never really accurate. My thing with Dillon and Shedeur is just, they're probably not best friends. They probably don't hang out, and they probably have very little interest in hanging out with each other. And yeah, there's probably some tension there because they're both competing for the same job. Do I think there's legitimate dislike there? Do I think that they are going to go out their way to make each other look bad or anything like that, or be unprofessional in pursuit of that tension? I don't think that's the case. I think that both of these guys are going to be respectful, professional with each other, and, in the context of the team, do their best to be helpful with each other, even if it's not going to benefit them. So, yeah, I don't think it's beef. I think what people are sensing there is just a little bit of tension. And obvious reasons that tension exists, and that tension goes both ways, right? You weren't seeing Shedeur jump up and down when Dillon Gabriel had a touchdown or anything like that, and you're not going to see Dillon Gabriel do the same thing because while they're both on the Browns, they both trying to have careers, and they're both in the same position, and they're both fighting for the same exact thing, and each other is in the way of those goals for this point in time in their life. There's tension there. Don't mean it's beef though, right? I don't think there's beef. I think people want to manufacture that tension into beef, but I don't think there's beef. I don't think there's a legitimate disdain. Like, I think we overuse the word beef too. Let me just get on that. I'm sorry. This is an old head rant. I'm sorry. But just people overuse the word beef. Like, beef, as Biggie said, is when I see you, there's going to be an ICU, right? That's beef. That on site is beef, right? Like, it's going down. That's beef. If it's not that, it's not beef. Is there tension? Sure. It's not beef, okay? Maybe they don't like each other. That still ain't beef, right? Like, beef is Kendrick Drake. They're dropping bars against each other, bombs, legitimately trying to publicly ruin each other's careers. That's beef. This is just professional tension, my guy. And that's very normal in the workplace, by the way. I don't know if you work or if you listen to this and you haven't gotten into the professional workspace before, or even just in the career workspace, right? Like when you get a job that you care about advancing in, or you in a field that you care about advancing in, guess what you're going to feel a lot of? Professional tension, right? Because you're trying to get yours and somebody else trying to get theirs, and they might not be nothing personal, but they just happen to be in your way. That's just, some of y'all going to just realize that that's just adulthood. You know what I mean? But let's go ahead, Edward, and say this. Steelers just picked up Adam Thielen off waivers. Bills picked up Brandon Cooks last week. Considering the Browns have arguably the weakest wide receiver room and their record puts them near the top of the waiver order, is it malfeasance that Andrew Berry hasn't picked up one of these proven veteran wide receivers? So there's a common denominator between the two teams that you stated, right? The Bills picked up Brandon Cooks. Well, the Bills are going to be in the playoff. The Steelers picked up Adam Thielen. Well, the Steelers are trying to win the division so they can be in the playoff. The Browns are not in the playoff hunt, which means if you're the Browns, what they're trying to do is prioritize developing youth on their team. They're trying to see what they have in these young guys. They're trying to give these young guys more opportunity, more tape to see what they can and cannot do versus specific types of coverages, techniques, all of those things. So what you're pointing out there isn't some kind of malfeasance by Andrew Berry, but just the reality of the Browns being in a very different situation than the Steelers, than the Buffalo Bills, right? If the Browns brought in Adam Thielen or Brandon Cooks, it would be a waste of both Brandon Cooks' time and the Browns' time. Because what do we need to know if Brandon Cooks can play football, right? Like, that's not going to do anything for them. Their win-loss record is irrelevant at this point. So, yeah, I just think that's just the different parts of the season. I mean, if the Browns were a game away from winning first place, I might be with you on this. But since the Browns are a game away from being the second pick in the draft, I'm not with you on that one. Like, I would have to disagree. But thank you for the question, Edward. The next question comes from Michael, who says this. Hey, Q, Watson's 21-day window just opened. Does that mean we stop losing salary credit as of right now, or is it actually when he's cleared to play? I can answer that question very quickly for you. Yeah, it's when he's cleared to play. So what the Browns have insurance for is Deshaun Watson, right? They insured his contract. Now, the latest number I've heard, the most official number I've heard and seen people in this space, the salary cap space, go with, is that the Browns have $44.6 million insured on Deshaun Watson's contract, which means if Deshaun Watson were to miss the entire year, the Browns would get $44.6 million in cap reimbursement. And I know some people are like, it doesn't hit the cap. From all the people I've talked to, all the people who do the salary cap stuff, or at least cover the salary cap stuff, it seems very clear to me that they are saying that this would be cap relief, salary cap space relief of $44.6 million of salary cap space release. It's not cash relief, which I think most people are confusing this with, right? The Browns are still on the hook to pay Deshaun Watson his money because that money is already escrowed and guaranteed to Deshaun. So they're not going to get a ton of that money back, but they are going to get salary cap relief. So there is that. So $44.6 million if Deshaun misses the whole year. It is prorated from what I can tell, which means it's on a per game basis. So when Deshaun Watson is cleared to play, that is when they stop getting the insurance, because the insurance is saying, hey, you had this player, you thought he'd be able to play, he's not able to play. If you get to the point to where he is cleared to play medically, then that's when the insurance stops after 6 games. So he has to miss at least 6 games for insurance to kick in as well. So that is the best of my knowledge of how I can understand it. If Deshaun Watson comes back, then you can prorate whatever the $46 million would be to whatever percentage of the season that he missed. So we're talking about now until potentially week 15, 16. So that is how that will work. It is prorated, not all or nothing. So, and no, the Browns aren't losing salary cap credit when he's on his 21-day window, because remember, he's still on PUP while he's on his 21-day window. He's not on the active roster. He doesn't count towards a roster spot on the active roster. The Browns can keep him off the active roster for 21 days. I don't think that means that if Deshaun Watson is cleared to play in his 7th day of that 21-day window, that means that you can continue to get the insurance money. I think it matters when he's cleared to play versus when you put him on the active roster again. But it's more about when he gets cleared to play. If he's cleared to play right now, then yeah. But until he's cleared to play, then that's when that's when the insurance benefit ends for the Browns. And any benefit that you will get from Deshaun missing this year does not affect this year's salary cap. It affects next year's salary cap. So keep that one in mind as well. Thank you for the question, Michael. The next one is from QnA, who says this. Do you think Deshaun will be in the mix to be a bridge quarterback in 2026? I think it would cost them about $100 million next year to cut him. Let's see how much it would actually cost to cut Deshaun Watson. We can figure this out real quick by going to over the cap, getting to the Browns page on over the cap, going to 2026, and to cut Deshaun Watson, his cap number would be $80 million. You would lose, well, you would have to, so the way it works is that his dead money for next year is $131 million, right? But if you cut Deshaun Watson, you would save $50 million. So you subtract those two numbers, it would net cost you about $80 million to cut Deshaun Watson. Now, let's say insurance plays a role in this, right? Because that's the other factor. So right now, without the insurance factored in, it's 80. Now let's factor in the insurance element of this, right? So cap savings, you would get about one of his $131 million that you would lose on the cap, right? You would get savings of $50 million, just how his contract is structured by letting it go this year. That's without the insurance factored in. The insurance, so that brings it to about $81 million of dead money for cutting Deshaun Watson without the insurance. Let's say you get the full 44 from insurance, right? Probably not going to happen, but let's say you get the full 44 from insurance. You get that, then it costs you about $37 million to cut Deshaun Watson. So not going to be that big $100 million number. Could be as low as $37 million from how I understand the cap to currently work. If I'm wrong and you are somebody who studies this, feel free to message me about this because I would love to know exactly how it works. But that's my understanding of it. And if that's the case, $37 million to cut Deshaun, I don't think that's crazy, but they might decide to restructure, push the cap down the road for all of the, the positive reasons that they would do it. Remember, when the Browns restructure, push a can down the road, they're betting on revenues going up for the NFL. As long as revenues go up for the NFL, that means that the salary cap goes up, and the more money you push down the road, it's like reverse interest on the credit card, right? Where it actually benefits you to have a balance if you're the Browns versus spending all or clearing it all right now. So that's kind of where it is, right? Kind of think of it like how, now I'm not even gonna go there because that's too deep into a bag, but yeah, that's how to think of it. Real quick, let's talk about our sponsor, Sleeper. Real quick, just want to let you guys know Sleeper has a new offer here. They're offering a free $20 entry, no deposit required. And also, if you're a first-time user, you also will receive a 100% match on up to $100 when you use the promo code WORSTTAKE. Again, $20 free, no deposit required. Plus, first-time users also receive 100% deposit match up to $100. Join Sleeper. All right, the next question comes from FDBD, who says this. Hey, Q, do we let Watson play a couple of weeks to try to get some trade value out of him? If he plays good, I don't think an organization is sold on either rookie. You got a better chance trying to trade Shedeur or Dylan Gabriel than you got trying to trade Deshaun Watson. One, going to be significant. You're not going to get a lot back for Deshaun. Nobody's really going to be eager to bring that on. I would wonder if he got cut today, who's really going to be knocking on that door to sign Deshaun Watson at this point of his career? I just don't think he's a valuable asset. So no, I don't see any value in letting him play because he's a lost commodity, man. We lost our money on this. That's just it. We got to take the L, right? Deshaun Watson is that old ratty truck that your uncle had in his garage since you were a child, right? We all, well, most of us have an uncle or somebody in our family that be fixing up cars, and we all know that sometimes one of them cars don't ever get fixed. And instead of pouring money into that car and more time into that car, you just be better off calling the junker to come pick it up, right? That's what it is. It's over. It doesn't work. It didn't work, and it ain't going to work here. It's done. The Browns, as Jimmy Haslam said, took a huge swing and missed. And that's what it is. There's no winning this thing. There's no salvaging it by trying to get trade value. There's no salvaging it by trying to make him be your bridge quarterback next year. It's over. You lost money. Just move on to the next car, right? Stop trying to get money out of this. Stop trying to see if you can squeeze some trade value out of this. All you're doing is wasting your time and the time of everybody else around you. It's over. It's done. Maybe that car gonna drive again, but it ain't gonna be you who fixes it. You ain't got the facilities to do it. It is what it is. We really don't gotta keep harping. John says this: hey Q, what are your expectations from the future of the Browns offensive line? Seems like that group is headed towards a full rebuild. Joe Bitonio likely retiring, Ethan Posick being free agents, Conklin not having a fully guaranteed deal. Do you think that it makes sense to retain any of these guys to develop a young QB, or should they just draft replacements and get younger and cheaper at those positions? I think the rebuild of the offensive line is going to resemble the rebuild of the defensive line when Jim Schwartz got here. Remember, Jim Schwartz got here in 2023, and he took over a team that had some of the worst three-tech play I personally have ever evaluated. I made fun videos about it, right? Like, remember I did the Nutcracker over the tape of the Buffalo Bills game because the Browns were opening up so many rushing lanes in the middle of the field that it felt poetic. It felt art. It felt like watching water flow down a rocky ravine. That's how it felt to watch the Browns defensive line play in 2022. But Jim Schwartz came in. There was a lot of resources put towards the defensive line. The first thing the Browns did to rebuild the defensive line was to throw money at it, right? They didn't throw irresponsible money at it, but they went out and they got themselves some starters on the interior. Maybe the Browns go out and they get themselves some starters at guard. Maybe they upgrade at center. Maybe they give a young guy an opportunity there. But there are going to be significant resources thrown out at this offensive line at some point, right? You know, there are some people that the Browns could look at for tackle, right, if they're interested, that fit their timeline going forward. But they're going to sign somebody to do some of that stuff. Over the next couple of years, they're also going to put draft assets into the position. The same way that the Browns, first year that Jim Schwartz is here, he drafts a defensive tackle, he drafts an edge rusher, right? Puts some resources on that defensive line. They're going to do the same thing on the offensive line. And then they're going to continue to refine this process. Maybe they find their guy to be a tackle sooner than later, right? And they take the first round swing at that guy in this draft. Maybe they don't have that guy right now, right? But they're going to keep, putting in, trying to install long-term solutions where they feel like long-term solutions are available in the draft. And then they're going to duct tape anything that needs to be duct taped in the time being. So just like how they did with the defensive line, similar process to the offensive line. I expect some veterans to be thrown in here in the offseason, and I expect them to do that at wide receiver as well. But that's really how I think it should play out. Zoink says this: Hey Q, appreciate all the coverage through this rough Brown season. Do you think the Browns can land a top 5 pick and a non-needy QB team like Tennessee, New York gives them their first pick, or do whatever it needs to do to trade up? If they believe that if they believe one of the quarterbacks is coming out. So here's something interesting to think about, right? Now again, the draft order is going to change a ton over the next 4 weeks. So don't get too married to what the draft order looks like. Right now, ahead of the Cleveland Browns are 4 teams. The Tennessee Titans, who definitely aren't taking a quarterback. The New York Giants, who definitely aren't taking a quarterback. The New Orleans Saints, who took a quarterback in the second round last year. And the Las Vegas Raiders, who paid Geno Smith $25 million to play quarterback for them and brought in Geno Smith's old head coach in Pete Carroll. So the 4 teams ahead of the Cleveland Browns are all not quarterback needy. Now, I can hear you saying from across the room, well, Quincy, it's not about those teams taking a quarterback in front of the Browns. It's about a team wanting to trade up with one of those 4 teams to get a quarterback. And I do think that's something that you have to consider, right? One of these teams behind the Browns, like the Jets, are sitting at 7. They got a lot of resources, and they might want to move up. Here's the problem. Well, here's the good thing for the Browns, not the problem, the good thing. When there are 4 teams in front of you that all could realistically pass on a quarterback this year, don't really have the desire to go at the quarterback for one reason or the other, right? And there are maybe the Browns and the Jets in the quarterback market. Those are 2 teams that are in the quarterback market right now. I don't really think Atlanta is in the quarterback market, and even if they were, it doesn't matter because LA has their pick. But let's say LA's kind of like watching the quarterback market, but there's not really that many teams in the market. Right now, you would have more sellers of draft picks to move up than you would have buyers. Now, what that means is that that's going to lower the price of a trade up. So if the Browns wanted to move up from 5 to 2, this year it's probably going to be a lot cheaper because there's going to be 4 teams that could say to themselves, we need to trade back. And when everybody's trying to trade back, that's usually when nobody gets to trade back because the price for trading back just gets cheaper and cheaper because there's just too many teams that are also in that market that's going to lower that price. So that's something to look at, right? The more and more teams ahead of the Browns that don't seem the most quarterback needy, and again, all the 2 and 1 win teams, you can make an argument, do not need quarterbacks. You can make the argument the Browns could sit at 5, and if those teams pick as expected, the Browns can take whatever quarterback they want. So, yeah, that's going to be something to look at. That's why I'm not really sweating a trade up. I don't think this is going to be a year where trade up is going to be super expensive because there's going to be a lot of teams that are going to be looking for that opportunity to move back. Last year was a bit unique. Nobody really wanted to move in the top 5, and the Jaguars wanted somebody that they were convinced was going to go at 2. They also had an inexperienced general manager leading the charge who has a bit of an over-enthusiastic kind of philosophy about this thing, right? It was a unique set of circumstances that put Andrew Berry in a seat of leverage against somebody who was willing to offer a lot just to move up a couple of spots. Don't expect that to be the case every year, though, right? If the Browns want to move up and secure a quarterback, they can call the New York Giants and maybe get something done. They could call the Tennessee Titans and get something done. They could call the New Orleans Saints and get something done. There are 3 teams that would be more than willing to pick up the phone and negotiate with Cleveland. And when there are 3 teams that are willing to negotiate with you, that means there are 3 people to play off of each other. And when there's 3 people to play off of each other, when you're trying to make a move up and they all want you to make that move up and they got nobody else to really compete with you, that price is going to go down. It's just basic economics here. It works with draft demand as well, right? But that's my thoughts. Let's continue here. Key says this. Hey Q, despite Judy will probably be on the team. Oh, despite his play, Judy will probably be on the team next year. I agree. How do you think they'll build out the rest of the room, given some of the top options in free agency? Pierce, Dobbs, trade Ayuk, Waddle, Tate, Lemon, Bell. Appreciate the content. I think they're going to add some rookies to this room. I think they'll probably draft 2 wide receivers in this class. That's an early prediction there. We'll see how the draft class actually shapes up. But I think if everything goes the way that they want it to, and this wide receiver class is super deep, they want to leave out of here with 2 wide receivers, right? They don't seem super thrilled with Jamari Thrash. I think they see something in Cedric Tillman, but I don't know if they see enough to where they want to secure his spot going forward. I think they want to leave here with 2 young guys at the very least. And I think they should also consider getting a veteran in that room. Somebody who can kind of take some of that leadership responsibility off of Jerry Jeudy's plate. I think what happened with Jerry Jeudy this year is that they saw the production last year, they got excited, and they tried to put all of the responsibility of being a wide receiver 1 on the back of Jerry Jeudy, and they found out that that's just something he can't handle, right? He was the oldest guy, the most experienced vet in this locker room at the wide receiver position, so he was put in an obvious leadership spot, and it seems to be tough for him to handle that responsibility. I think Jerry Jeudy can play well for you. He obviously played well for you last year. I think you just got to set him up in a situation where he could just ball, right? He could just hoop. He's not worried about having to lead. He's not worried about having to ignite the offense by himself. He's just able to be a wide receiver 2 who can be super effective with the football. And I think if you do that with Jerry Jeudy, you put him in a strong position. Think about where he's played his best football. It's always been in situations where there's been a lot of talent or more talent at wide receiver than what there is right now with the Cleveland Browns. And I think that's kind of just how you have to think about this whole thing with Jerry Jeudy. So there's a player there that you could get something out of. We saw it in this offense. I wouldn't give up on him, even though it's really in vogue to just shit on Jerry Jeudy right now. I wouldn't give up on him. I just think you have to realize you put too much on his plate this last offseason, and you need to take some of that stuff off, and getting a veteran be the first thing you could do. But that's it for my Q&A. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night.